The forest holds its memories close, my friend. It's a truth Marcus Thompson learned in the autumn of his 63rd year when he found himself in a clearing that felt like a secret gazing upon a life that was never meant to be seen. But forgive me, I'm starting at the end of the story. Let's go back. Let me tell you how a man who had dedicated his life to science, a retired biologist, came to hold a miracle in his hands, a creature that would rewrite every truth he held dear about the mountains, about the wild, and about the gossamer thin veil between our world and another. You see, Marcus had poured 40 years of his soul into studying primates, 40 years of published papers, of lectures in hallowed university halls, of expeditions across 3 continents. He truly believed he had mapped every branch of their family tree. He was so beautifully, heartbreakingly wrong. And there in the Cascade range of Oregon, on an evening where the September sun bled like honey through the pines, that profound error almost cost him his life. Before we walk deeper into the woods with Marcus, would you do me a small kindness and join our community by subscribing? We share stories from the heart, the kind that make you wonder about the mysteries sleeping just beyond our sight. And believe me, after you hear what the forest showed Marcus, you'll want to be here for what comes next. So let me take you back to the beginning of the whisper. Not to the clearing, but before. 3 weeks before Marcus would meet the impossible, before the carefully constructed world he knew began to dissolve like a photograph left in the rain. The first thing he felt each morning was the quiet. It had been his constant companion for 5 years now, ever since his Linda passed. 5 years of waking to a silence so heavy it felt like a presence pressing on the walls and filling the sacred spaces where her laughter used to echo. The coffee pot still sang its familiar song. The old floorboards still sighed under his weight, but the silence beneath it all was a new and hollow thing, making every room feel like a vast, lonely cathedral. He would stand at his kitchen window, the warmth of a mug, a small comfort against the September air, and watch the fog drift like a ghost through the pines. 63 felt like a lifetime some mornings. It felt ancient when his knees would whisper tales of that bad fall back in 98, when his hands ached with the coming rain, when his own reflection showed him his father's face, the same silver in his stubble, the same map of lines around the eyes, the same quiet look of a man who had outlived his own story. The university had no more use for him. A mandatory retirement at 60, they had so clinically called it, as if a life's passion had an expiration date. 40 years of teaching, of searching, of trying to understand the hearts of primates, what made them so different, and what made them so achingly the same. All that wisdom was now just gathering dust in his study while he tried to learn what a man is supposed to do when his life's work is done. Linda always said the research was his anchor, that he'd drift away without it. She was right about almost everything, and the silence was her final gentle proof. His phone hummed softly on the granite counter, a message from his daughter Ashley, just a little note checking on him. "Are you eating okay, Dad?" She was a worrier, his Ashley. Since he lost Linda, she had taken it upon herself to be his gentle guardian, with calls twice a week and texts every day as if he might simply forget the mechanics of living. Her heart was in the right place, of course. They all meant well, Ashley, his son Derek, the neighbors with their endless casseroles after the funeral. But my friend, meaning well, is a world away from truly understanding. He typed a small, kind lie back to her fine. Made eggs. He hadn't, of course. The carton sat untouched. He thought maybe he'd eat later, or maybe not. The fog was a thick white blanket now pressing against the edge of the woods, as if it longed to come inside. Marcus had chosen this land 30 years ago for its solitude, 80 acres of wildness that bled into the national forest, with the nearest soul 2 miles down a road that surrendered to the winter rains. Linda had adored it here. This was her sanctuary, where she would paint watercolors of the light and the trees she could see from her window. After she was gone, he had to box her paintings away. He couldn't stand to see the world through her eyes anymore, but he could never ever let them go. Some things we keep not for their use, but because to release them would feel like a final goodbye, a betrayal of the love that remains. He drank the last of his coffee, rinsed the mug, and glanced at the clock. 7:30. The day unfolded before him like a long, empty road with no destination. So this was it, the golden years. The peace and rest he had supposedly earned. He was learning that peace can feel an awful lot like loneliness, and rest can feel like a slow, quiet fading away. The keys to his truck dangled by the door, a silent invitation. He could go to town, find a seat at the diner, and exchange pleasantries with people who still had places to be. Or he could do what he had done for weeks, now walk the land. Check the trail cameras he maintained from a ghost of a habit, and pretend he was still a scientist with a purpose, not just an old man trying to outrun the silence. The woods called to him, and as always, he answered. His breath plumed in the cold morning air, but Marcus hardly noticed the chill anymore. It seemed age had a way of insulating the heart, softening the sharp edges of the world, until everything was felt from a gentle distance. He followed the old deer path behind his home. His steps slow, not from any sense of caution, but from joints that sang a song of protest and a back that grumbled under the light weight of his pack, a pack that held only water, a first aid kit and a notebook he still carried from a lifetime of instinct. The forest here was a timeless place, a cathedral of old-growth Douglas fir and western hemlock, with red cedars whose trunks were as wide as his truck, reaching for a sky they almost completely obscured, turning midday into a soft green twilight. The very ground was a cushion of ancient needles, a testament to the endless sacred cycle of decay and rebirth he had devoted his life to studying. It smelled of damp earth and life and the sweet, dark perfume of time itself. Linda had understood his love for this place. She would walk beside him, her presence a quiet comfort moving through the green stillness, letting the soul of the forest seep into their own. She would pause to sketch the elegant curve of a branch, the way the light danced in the fog, or a burst of color from a mushroom on dark bark. She saw the poetry in the details. He, on the other hand, saw the data, the patterns of life, the territorial signs, the stark evidence of survival. And now, in the quiet, he missed her poetry more than he had ever missed his own facts. His first trail camera was fastened to a cedar about a quarter of a mile from the house, watching a path frequented by deer and elk. He pulled the small memory card and found nothing of note. A few does a young buck, the masked faces of raccoons in the night. It was all perfectly ordinary. Still, he recorded it in his book, Dates, Time, Species, as if it were a report someone was waiting for. The second camera was another half-mile deeper in, nestled near a creek that whispered all year long. This one held more life. He scrolled through the tiny images, a herd of elk, a fleeting glimpse of a bobcat and a black bear mother with her 2 cubs. The sight of the bear gave him pause. She was thin, her cubs small for the season. The world was warming, changing the ancient rhythms of life, and the bears were struggling to keep time. Nothing could adapt fast enough. He made a note of it for a journal no one would ever read. It was a prayer for them, I think, written in the language of science. The third camera was supposed to be a mile to the east. Instead, Marcus found it 90 feet from where it should have been hanging from an entirely different tree. The metal bracket was bent, the screws torn from the wood. He held it in his hands, turning it over in the dappled light, a deep furrow in his brow. Something had moved it. Something with the strength to rip it from a tree, but the strange delicacy to leave it unharmed and place it somewhere new. It was more than odd. It was impossible. A bear might claw a camera down or rub against a tree until the mount gave way. But a bear would not carry it 90 feet and carefully rehang it. nor would a cougar or a deer or any creature that walked these woods. Perhaps a person, he thought, but this was his land bordering a vast wilderness with no trails to lead a hiker this far from the world. With a sense of quiet dread, he checked the memory card. The last week of footage was nothing but a still life of unfamiliar trees. Whatever had done this had done so days ago. He began to scroll back his thumb, moving faster now, searching through the digital quiet for the exact moment when the world he knew had ceased to make sense. There it was, September 9th, at 3:12 in the morning. The camera was resting just as I'd left it, its gaze fixed on the game trail. Then the image trembled, plunged into darkness, a blur of motion, and what could have been fur or a shadow, or simply nothing at all. 5 chaotic seconds. And then stillness returned from a new angle, showing new trees, but perfectly steady, as if placed by a careful, knowing hand. I played it back 3 times, my friend. In a single frame, just a breath before the world tilted, my heart caught on something. A shape indistinct, far too large for a man, too erect for a bear. The night vision bathed everything in that ethereal green-white glow, blurring the fine details into mysteries. It could have been anything. It was probably nothing. A trick of the light and the shadows playing on an old man's eyes that have seen too much and now need stronger glass. And yet a whisper of unease settled deep within me. I marked the location with my GPS, took a photograph of its new perch, and gently collected the camera, my old friend. I knew I would have to see the footage properly back home on my computer, where I could breathe life into the image, slow the river of time, and analyze it with the familiar rituals that had defined my life for 40 years of research. You know how it is. Old habits are the ghosts we live with. The walk back should have been a simple retracing of steps. The same trees, the same well-worn trail, the same September morning slowly yielding to afternoon. But something felt changed. The forest held a quality I couldn't name. Not silence, no, for the woods are never truly silent. Birds still sang their stories. The wind still whispered through the branches, and the creek still murmured its secrets, somewhere to my left. But beneath it all was an absence, a deep-held breath, as if the entire world was waiting. I had felt this before, so many years ago in Sumatra, while searching for orangutans. It was the feeling that descends just before a tiger reveals itself, a moment when every creature in the jungle suddenly remembers it is prey. It isn't silence, but a different kind of attention, that ancient thrumming awareness that turns every shadow into a potential end. My hand, almost of its own accord, found the bear spray at my belt. I kept walking a steady rhythm, never running, because to run is to invite the chase, but not lingering either. My pulse quickened, despite myself, adrenaline sharpening the edges of the world into a beautiful, terrifying clarity. And then, nothing. The world simply continued on. I reached my property line, crossed the familiar fence, and made it to the house without a single sign. The feeling vanished the instant I stepped inside, leaving me standing in my own kitchen, breathing heavily, feeling like a fool. 63 years old, and here I was spooked by my own imagination, by too much time spent alone with my thoughts. I made a sandwich my body had no desire for, sat before my computer, and summoned the footage from the trail camera, my heart a quiet drum. On the large screen, the shape from that one fleeting frame was clearer, but only just. It was certainly large, perhaps 6 feet tall, though it's so hard to judge scale in the monochrome world of night vision. It was definitely moving on 2 legs. The posture was all wrong for a bear. Too upright, the shoulders too broad, the arms impossibly long. I coaxed the image, increasing the contrast, sharpening its edges. The software tried its best, my friend, but you can't draw a soul from pixels that were never there to begin with. What remained was a greenish blur that could be a bear on its hind legs, a person cloaked in darkness, or Bigfoot himself for all the proof it offered. I leaned back, rubbing my tired eyes, and felt that old familiar ache of insufficient data. This, my friend, is the heartache of cryptozoology. The very reason I'd always kept it at arm's length. It is a world built on too much hope and not enough evidence. People want to believe so fiercely, they will weave truth from blurry photographs and half-remembered tales. Real science, my science, demands something more. But I couldn't escape the one simple truth. Something had moved that camera. Something tall enough to reach it, strong enough to tear it from its moorings, and most unnervingly intelligent enough to mount it again with such care. I opened a browser, and my fingers, betraying the scientist in me, typed, "Bigfoot sightings, Cascade Range, Oregon." A blush of foolishness crept up my neck. This is how it begins, isn't it? Respected minds wandering down rabbit holes, chasing phantoms, and ending up as cautionary tales whispered in university halls. I could lose what little professional standing I had left. The search returned thousands of echoes. Databases of sightings, forums for amateur researchers, a sea of blurry photos and shaky videos, and stories that ranged from the chillingly plausible to the utterly unhinged. I drifted through a few, skimming the reports. Most were easily dismissed, but a few were different. They were detailed, they were consistent, they described patterns of behavior that mirrored the great apes I knew so well. Vocalizations like the chest-beating of gorillas, the pant-hooting of chimpanzees, the marking of territory, the use of tools, complex social structures. If you could just set aside the impossible part, the fact that a North American great ape cannot exist, that there is no fossil record, no genetic path, no ecosystem to sustain it. The reports read like my own field notes from the deep jungles of Borneo and Sumatra. I closed the browser and my gaze fell upon the frozen frame on my screen, that tall, blurred shape reaching for my camera. Logic and experience, my old trusted companions, told me it was nothing. But another voice, a quieter one, the one that made me a scientist in the first place, whispered a question. What if? Just those two small words, my friend. They are the seeds from which every great discovery has grown. Every paradigm has shifted. Every moment humanity realized the world was so much grander than we had ever dreamed. What if the earth circles the sun? What if we are all descended from a common ancestor? What if time itself is not a straight line? What if something is out there that science in all its wisdom has simply missed? 3 days later, I was back in those woods. With me, I carried new cameras, better mounts, and a research protocol born in the deep, sleepless hours of 2 in the morning. If something was rearranging my world, I would document it properly. I would weave a web of cameras covering every approach, using infrared triggers that responded to the warmth of a living thing, not just its movement. His knees may have whispered their complaints with every new mile, and his back surely felt the burden of a heavier pack. But his mind, oh, his mind was a clear sky after a long storm, sharper than it had been in forgotten months, or maybe even years. A purpose had returned to him, a question that hummed in his soul, begging to be answered. And that alone made every ache a beautiful, worthy price. The weather had turned as if to match my mood. Clouds clung low to the trees, and a fine mist beaded on every surface, that particular September dampness that seeps past your clothes and settles deep in your bones like a half-forgotten memory. I worked with a quiet focus, mounting cameras, adjusting their gaze and testing their reach. I marked each new eye in my GPS, noting its field of view, and set them all to their highest sensitivity. By the time the afternoon began to fade, I had a grid of 6 silent observers watching over a square mile of the forest, all of them focused on the sacred ground where my first camera had been moved. If something passed this way again, I would not miss it. I would capture it in a chorus of angles. And the forest, my dear friend, it still held that waiting quality. That feeling of prey alertness I could not shake. I kept glancing over my shoulder, catching flickers of movement in the corner of my eye that vanished when I turned to face them. My imagination, I told myself. It had to be. Nothing was stalking me. Nothing was watching. The prickling on the back of my neck was just age and paranoia, and too many hours alone in the wild heart of the world. He secured the last camera just as the light began to bleed from the sky, and after packing his gear, he turned his heart toward home. But the trail a dear friend he had walked for 30 years suddenly wore a stranger's face in the dimness. The landmarks hid themselves, and the fog played tricks with the distance. His GPS whispered that he was still 1.5 miles from his own land. A journey he could make, yes, but the true deep dark would be his only companion long before he arrived. I should have left hours ago, my love. Such a foolish mistake. My Linda, how you used to gently scold me for this very thing, for getting so lost in my focus that I'd forget my own limits. I promised you I would be more careful, but that was 7 years ago, and now only the memory of your voice is here to hold me to it. I clicked on my headlamp, my friend, and kept moving forward. The beam was a lonely blade through the solid fog, showing me just 10 feet of the world and nothing more. In the dark, the sounds of the woods changed their tune. Every snapped branch became the footfall of something large. Every bird's call sounded like a warning. I knew in my mind that it was just my own fears painting pictures that this was the same forest I'd walked 1,000 times. But the heart and the mind, they rarely speak the same language. I was maybe 3/4 of a mile from home when my world tilted on its axis. That's when I heard it. It was a sound that has no name, a voice I'd never heard in all my years in the wild. It wasn't a growl nor a howl. It was a low, resonant vibration that trembled in the air, part raw, part mournful cry, and part something else that hummed in my chest and made my teeth ache. It came from the darkness to my left, perhaps 100 yards off the trail, and in that moment, my dear friend, my entire being just froze. Every nerve, every fiber of my soul screamed that this was wrong. This was not the call of a bear or a cougar or any of the creatures that called these mountains their home. This was something other, something alien, something that simply should not be. The sound came again, and my heart fell because this time it was closer. 50 yards, maybe even less. I could hear the sharp crack of branches breaking the sound of something immense moving through the undergrowth with no care for stealth. My hand trembling found the cold comfort of my bear spray. I knew in that ancient part of my soul that still remembers the darkness that it would be a useless token against this. But just holding it, my friend made me feel a little less helpless against the coming night. Then the movement stopped. The silence that followed was as heavy as water pressing in on me. My small beam of light showed me nothing but ghostly trees and fog, a circle of safety that seemed to shrink with every breath. Oh, how I wanted to run. Every muscle in my body was coiled with the need to flee. But to run is to declare yourself prey, and I knew as surely as I knew how to breathe that whatever was out there would give chase. And so our Marcus, bless his heart, did something even wilder than running. He let his voice fly out into the unknown. "I'm not a threat," I said, my voice cracking before it found its resolve. "I'm just passing through. I'm not here to cause you any trouble." Talking to it, can you imagine? As if it could understand me. As if it were not just an animal, but a being of intelligence. It sounds ridiculous, I know. But then I remembered the stories, the whispers of an intelligence that would carefully move a trail camera instead of simply destroying it. No answer came. The silence stretched for so long that I started to believe I had imagined it all, that my age and my solitude had finally conspired to break something in my mind. And then, my friend, I heard it breathing. It was close, far too close, just beyond the edge of my light, hidden somewhere in that fog-shrouded dark. The breaths were slow and impossibly deep, as if it were inhaling the very air from my lungs. The fog was a cruel trickster, bouncing the sound until it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at all. "I'm leaving now," I whispered, keeping my voice as calm and gentle as a prayer. "I'm just backing away slowly. No sudden moves." I took one careful step backward, then another. The breathing followed me, a perfect, terrible rhythm matching my own pace. Something was following me. Not attacking, not charging. Just following. Was it curiosity, my friend, or was it the patience of a hunter? Out here it can be so hard to tell the difference. I kept backing away, my light fixed ahead, the bear spray a cold promise in my right hand. My left fumbled in my pocket for my phone, a desperate search in the dark. I thought of my Ashley, and I prayed that if this was to be my end, at least she would have a place to come and find what was left of me. It was a morbid thought, I know. I pushed it away and just kept my feet moving. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the breathing stopped. That was worse. Dear God, that was so much worse. At least before I knew where it was. Now it could be anywhere, circling me in the dark. My heart beat against my ribs like a trapped bird, so hard it hurt. I'm 63 years old, my friend. A man my age isn't built for this kind of fear. Our hearts simply give out. I finally turned, abandoning my backward retreat, and I moved as fast as my old legs would allow down that familiar trail. Not a run, but a desperate walk, my light jerking with each step, revealing only the path, the trees, and the empty darkness that I prayed held nothing waiting for me. I didn't look back. You can't look back. It slows you down. It makes you fall. I had to trust the trail, a friend I've known for what feels like a lifetime. I had to believe my feet remembered the way home when my eyes could no longer see it clearly. The breathing did not return. There were no sounds of pursuit, no breaking branches. There was only the sound of my own ragged breath and the sharp complaints my knees were screaming up at me. Then I saw them, the lights of my house shining through the trees like a promise of salvation. The moment I crossed my property line, the world snapped back into place. I stood in my own yard, bent over with my hands on my knees, my body trying to cast out the terror shaking from an adrenaline storm. It was no longer built to weather. Nothing had followed me from the woods. I could feel it in my bones. I was safe. I was alone, and I was quite possibly completely insane. I walked to my house on legs that felt as though they were made of water, locked the door behind me, and just stood in my kitchen trying to catch my breath and wondering what in the world had just happened out there. My phone buzzed in my hand, a lifeline. It was a text from my dear Ashley. "Dad, you okay? Your GPS shows you were in the woods pretty late." Of course. I'd forgotten she could track me. We set that up after I lost my Linda, after Ashley grew so worried that I might fall out here all alone with no one to know for days. It is her love reaching out to hold me even from afar. His message back was a simple truth hiding a world of fear. I'm fine. I lost track of time. I'm home now. It wasn't a lie, not really. Time had indeed slipped from his grasp, and he was within his own walls. He just left out the part about a presence in the woods that breathed like a titan and spoke in a language with no name. Marcus poured 2 fingers of whiskey, a comfort his doctor had forbidden, but a comfort he felt in his soul he had earned, and sat before his computer. His hands trembled, so it took him 3 tries to guide the glass to his lips. The whiskey was a welcome fire settling warm in his core, and it began to quiet the terror that still echoed through him. He opened the folder holding the forest's secrets and called up that hazy image again, that tall, impossible shape reaching for his camera. Just 3 days ago, in the safety of his kitchen, it had seemed like a ghost, a trick of the light, something the world could explain away. But now, his heart knew better. Now he had heard the soul of what truly lived out there. The forest, you see, it never forgets. It holds its truths in the deepest shadows, in the spaces between trees where the sun has never touched. And dear Marcus had stumbled into one of those truths, had been measured by it, and found, well, he wasn't sure if he was found wanting or simply uninteresting, but he knew with the certainty born from 4 decades of listening to the wild's whispers that he had been in the presence of something that should not be, something ancient and powerful, utterly unknown to our small world of science. The question that settled in his soul was what he was to do with this truth. He could tell the world, of course. Call the Forest Service, speak of something vast and unnamed in the mountains. They would offer him kind smiles and softer voices, thinking him a lonely old man seeing shadows. Or he could seek out those who chase myths and offer what was left of his reputation to their cause. Or he could be the one to tell its story, properly, with the same loving care and detail that had been the song of his career. To find proof so pure it could not be denied, forcing the world of science to finally open its eyes to what it had refused to see for decades. That last thought, my friend, felt like a purpose. It felt like the kind of reason that makes the morning sun feel like a promise again. Marcus finished his whiskey, opened a fresh document on his computer, and gave it a name: Field Notes, Cascade Range Anomaly. Then he began to write, letting the story unfold. The date, the time, the place, every single detail of what his heart had heard and felt and feared. No grand tales, no guesses, just the simple, honest truth. The way he had always known. Outside, the September night pressed gently against his windows. The forest was a wall of deep velvet beyond his small circle of light. And somewhere in that profound darkness, another being was taking notes on him too, in its own way, with its own unknowable heart. The world had changed for him. Marcus just didn't know the rules of this new, beautiful, terrifying game. Sleep was a distant shore he could not reach that night. Marcus lay watching shadows drift across the ceiling, his heart catching at every creak of the old house. The logical part of his mind whispered that he was being foolish, that fear had turned a simple bear or elk into a monster. But the part of him that had kept him alive for 40 years in the wild knew better. He must have found peace eventually, for he awoke to the gentle morning light filtering through his curtains and the sound of his phone's soft ring. Ashley's name glowed on the screen. He answered, his voice a low whisper from the long night. "Hey, my sweetheart." "Dad, oh, you sound so very tired." "It was just a long night. I'm fine, my love." "Your GPS says you were out so very late yesterday. What were you doing out there?" Of course. He'd forgotten how she watched over him like a guardian angel. "I was just adjusting some of my old research equipment. The time got away from me." "Research equipment?" Her voice was so gentle yet skeptical. "But I thought you were retired from all that." "Just because I retired doesn't mean my heart did. I'm just watching the local wildlife. It keeps this old mind busy." A soft pause hung between them. Ashley knew him well enough to hear the truth he wasn't speaking. "Dad, if you're having a hard time, there are people you can talk to. You don't have to be so isolated out there." "Oh, but I'm not isolated. I truly love it here. But you're all alone. Ever since Mom." Her voice trailed into a shared silence, full of a love that was still so present. "I'm okay, Ashley. I promise. I'm just working on a little project. It gives your old man something to focus on." Another moment of quiet, then so much softer. "Okay, but you'll call me if you need anything. And maybe Maybe not stay out so late. I worry about you. I know you do. I'll be so careful. I love you. I love you too. My heart whispered back the words, a silent echo. After the call, I just laid there, my love, feeling the gentle weight of her concern. Ashley means well. They all do. But their kindness can't fill this hollow you left, this sacred space carved out by your absence. It can't offer me a purpose beyond the stark command to not fade away alone in these woods. I sought comfort in small rituals, my dear, a warm shower, an actual breakfast for once. I filled my pack with new eyes for the forest fresh batteries and empty memory cards. A whole week of silent stories was waiting for me. If the night had shared one of its secrets, I would finally have proof. The morning was a masterpiece, so clear with frost on the grass like scattered diamonds melting in the early sun. It was the kind of September day that makes you believe winter is just a beautiful myth. I drove the truck down the logging road as far as the earth would allow, then parked and walked into the heart of the trees. That feeling of being watched, that constant hum of being prey, it had vanished. The woods felt like woods again, a symphony of bird song, a whisper of wind in the branches, the gentle everyday sounds of a world at peace. Whatever had moved through the darkness had journeyed on, or was deep in slumber, or had simply decided I was not worth its time. I checked the cameras with a quiet reverence, moving from north to south across my grid. The first three held the usual poetry of the wild deer moving like ghosts, clever raccoons on their nightly quests, a lone coyote anointing its kingdom. But the fourth camera, the one I'd placed exactly where the first had been moved, held an entirely different verse. At 3:47 in the morning, a shape stepped out of the ghostly white light of the infrared. It was a figure tall and cloaked in shadow moving through the frame. It walked upright on two legs with shoulders impossibly broad and arms that swung in a rhythm that was almost human, but not quite. It was too smooth, too powerful, like watching a river take the form of a man. My love, a chill ran through me, a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun. I played the footage again and again. 6 seconds of impossible clarity from a new angle. The creature, I can call it nothing else now, moved with such purpose, heading northwest, seemingly unaware of my little camera, or perhaps entirely unconcerned by it. The fifth camera caught it from behind on its return journey at 8:12 in the morning. The same soul, I thought. The same towering height. The same powerful flowing gait. Only this time, it was carrying something. I zoomed in my heart, a captive bird in my chest as the image resolved. Branches, I thought at first. And then my breath caught in my throat. It was a smaller shape, draped so tenderly across the creature's powerful arms. It was limp, either lost in a deep sleep, or lost to this world forever. The sixth camera showed only the empty woods. Whatever the creature had been carrying wherever it was going, it had passed outside the small grid of my understanding. I stood there in the golden September sunshine, my heart performing a frantic rhythm that would have worried my cardiologist, just staring at a film that shouldn't exist. 6 seconds from one angle, 8 from another. 14 seconds in total, my dear, of clear documented proof of a creature that science has always called a dream. And it was caring for something. That single act implied so much more than instinct. It hinted at a social world, at empathy, at an intelligence that reached far beyond mere survival. I knew at once I needed more cameras, a wider net to catch these secrets. I had to know what that smaller shape was, where it was being taken with such care, and why. Oh, Linda, the scientist in me was screaming, a frantic voice crying out for methodology and caution, warning me not to jump to conclusions. But beneath that, there was a deeper, more ancient whisper. It was the instinct that kept our ancestors alive when they were the prey, the chilling knowledge that a predator carrying its young means a den is nearby, means danger, means you are standing too close to something that can erase you. I packed up my cameras and headed back toward my truck. I told myself I would review the footage properly at home, enhance it, slow it down, analyze every single frame. But first, I just needed to get out of those woods before my luck ran out, and I became the next thing that creature was carrying. The walk back felt impossibly long. Every shadow held teeth. Every sound was a warning. I have spent my entire career studying predators, my love, learning to move through their homes with respect. But this was different. This was being in the presence of something that existed in a space I never knew was there. An apex mind with apex strength, with no fear of humans, because we had never ever been a threat. I made it to the truck without being seen, and I drove home faster than the old logging road appreciated. I locked myself inside my house as if mere walls could keep out something that can peel cameras from trees like bark. Then I opened a beer. I know it was early, but some moments simply demanded, and I loaded the footage from the forest onto my computer. Frame by precious frame, I analyzed what I had captured. The creature stood somewhere between 6 and 7 feet tall, though it was hard to be exact. Broad shoulders, long arms, and legs as thick as tree trunks. It was covered in dark hair, or fur, brown or black. It was impossible to tell in the black and white of the infrared. Its face was always turned away, a secret kept from the lens. But the way it walked, my God, the gait. I've spent years studying the way primates move, the distinct styles of gorillas, chimps, humans. This was something in between, a perfect fusion. The confident stride of a creature born to walk on 2 legs, but with a power and grace that spoke of pure muscle, with not a single ounce of wasted energy, and the small shape it carried. I enhanced that section of the film, sharpened the edges. It wasn't a deer, far too small. It wasn't any prey animal I could name. The proportions were all wrong. It was another creature just like itself, smaller, a juvenile. Whether it was injured or sick, or had already passed on, it was impossible to tell. But the way the larger one carried it, almost cradling it, that was the language of care. That was protection. I sat back, rubbing my face, and felt the true magnitude of what I was seeing settle deep into my bones. This wasn't just evidence of an unknown species, my love. This was evidence of a society, of family, of compassion. This was proof that we are not alone at the top of that cognitive pyramid, and I had just stumbled into their world. I had witnessed a private moment they might never want witnessed. In the animal kingdom, that kind of knowledge can get you killed. My phone rang again. It was Ashley. I let her voice go to the machine. I couldn't talk to her right now, couldn't pretend that everything was normal, when my entire understanding of the world had just been so beautifully, so terrifyingly rewritten. The question that kept circling in my mind wasn't whether I should report this. The question was whether I would survive long enough to even make that choice. Because something that intelligent, that strong, that unknown, it had been living in these mountains for who knows how long without being discovered. That takes a profound stealth. It takes planning, the ability to avoid us, to move like a ghost, and to eliminate threats when they become necessary. And I, my dear Marcus, had just announced my presence with a grid of cameras, leaving my scent all over their sacred territory, like a calling card. That old familiar feeling, my love, the one that whispers of being hunted, had returned, a constant pressing weight at the base of my skull. I found myself checking the locks on the doors, then the windows, my gaze drawn to the woods where the shadows seemed to pool and deepen even under the bright afternoon sun. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that somewhere in the heart of that forest, a pair of eyes was turned toward me. Something knew I was there, and it was watching me back. So my dear Marcus turned to the computer, calling up a map of that wild country. I let my fingers trace the path, marking each place a camera had caught a glimpse, drawing lines that whispered of a journey. If my heart was right, If this was a parent tending to its wounded child, then their sanctuary would lie at the center of it all, a place of shelter and safety nestled near life-giving water. My finger drifted over the screen, a ghost of a touch on possible havens. A box canyon about 3 miles to the northeast. A system of caves I once knew so well back in the days when my knees didn't betray me. And of course, that ancient grove of trees so dense it could swallow secrets whole. The sensible part of me whispered that I should just let it be. I should tell the authorities, hand over my findings, and walk away from the mystery. But you and I both know, my love, that Marcus has never been very good at being sensible. And so I began to pack a familiar ritual for a journey into the unknown, my small tent, the sleeping bag, enough supplies to last for 3 days. If I was going to truly understand, I needed to find their home, to witness their life, to bring back something so real, so undeniable that no one could ever call it a lie. But if I'm being truly honest with you, my heart, it was more than that. I had to know if the little one was all right. The memory of it so limp and fragile in its parents' arms. It was the very picture of a worried mother or father carrying a sick child. You just don't turn your back on that kind of love. That was your rule, wasn't it, Linda? You always told me to help where I could, to never ever look away from another's suffering, no matter how much it frightened me. Oh, you would have called me a stubborn old fool for this, my love. And then, with that beautiful smile, you would have helped me pack every last thing. With my gear finally loaded, Marcus took a moment to check the sky's promise. 3 clear days ahead, it said, with temperatures in the 50s and no sign of rain. It was a gift, really the best one September could offer. I left a note on my computer, a quiet little message for the world just in case. The coordinates of my destination, the dates, a request to check my cameras if I didn't come back. It feels a bit grim to write it, but at 63, with a heart that dances to its own unpredictable rhythm, you learn to plan for the silences. Then, with a final turn of the key in the lock, I climbed into my old truck and pointed it toward the mountains, toward the impossible thing that was waiting for me in the wild. And the forest, my love, it opened its arms and took me in as if it had been hungry for me all this time. The box canyon was just as Marcus remembered it, 3 miles northeast of my cameras, a secret whispered into a fold of the mountains. I'd come this way once, perhaps 15 years ago, chasing a ghost story that turned out to be just coyotes. The path was a cruel reminder of time's passage. My knees cried out with every turn, and my lungs ached for air. But I kept on one foot placed carefully before the other, because to stop was to let the doubt in. The sun was beginning its slow descent by the time I stood at the canyon's mouth. It was a narrow opening no more than 20 feet wide, guarded by a tangle of fallen logs that seemed untouched by time. Or so it appeared, but your old Marcus looked closer, my eyes reading the ground like a beloved book I've known for 40 years. There was no clear path, no prints, no broken branches to announce the passage of something 7 feet tall. But then I saw it. A faint hollow in the moss, its edges blurred by wind and rain, but still holding the shape of a foot. And higher on a cedar tree, a scrape in the bark about 6 feet from the ground, the wood beneath it still new and pale. Something immense had been here. And not so long ago. Marcus made my small camp about 50 yards from that entrance, a respectful distance close enough to listen, but far enough to offer peace. My tent is a humble one-man shelter, a kindness to my old back. I moved with the quiet grace, born of decades spent in the wild, where every sound is a story, and silence is a prayer. As I finished my simple chores, the true dark arrived. It's a darkness you never find in the city. My love, a profound velvet that lets the sky spill its heart out in a river of stars. I sat on an old log, your Marcus eating a protein bar that tasted of both cardboard and memory, and I just listened as the forest began to breathe its nightly song. The world sings a different tune after the sun has gone to rest. The owls called to one another, claiming their kingdoms of air. Little creatures rustled in the leaves. These were the sounds I knew, the familiar, comforting voices of a world whose rules I understood. And then around 10 o'clock in the evening I heard something new. It began as a whisper, a low sound that I felt in my chest before my ears even knew what to make of it. This wasn't the cry from 3 nights past. This was something else entirely. It was softer, almost a melody. It had a rhythm, a cadence. It felt like a conversation, like a story being told. And woven within it was another voice, higher and softer, answering back. 2 voices, my love. A parent and a child sharing the quiet of the night. My hands were trembling, but Marcus managed to pull out my little audio recorder and point it toward the canyon. For 5 minutes, I listened to a language the world has never heard, a conversation that science insists is impossible. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The silence that followed was as complete as a door being gently shut. I waited. For 1 hour, then 2. The log grew hard beneath me, and the cold crept into my bones, a familiar old ache. Around midnight, I finally surrendered and crawled into my tent, but sleep felt a world away. My heart was a drum in the darkness, my mind a whirlwind of sound and wonder. That recording, it just played over and over in my mind, the way the voices intertwined, one waiting for the other to finish. It was a true conversation. I could hear the emotion in it, my love, the deep, gentle concern in one voice, the quiet distress in the other. This was more than just instinct. This was language. And if I was right, and 40 years of listening to the wild told me that I was, then I had just captured something that could change everything. Proof of an intelligence that could rewrite all our books, that could make us question everything we thought we knew about our place in this world. Or perhaps, my dear, I had only recorded the echoes of my own lonely heart, a story spun from weariness and a foolish old man's desire to mean something one last time. Sleep finally found me. But it was a restless, shallow thing filled with dreams of you. Linda calling my name from the canyon's dark mouth, and my feet being too heavy to ever reach you. The dawn came cold and pale, the light filtering through my tent like a half-hearted promise. Your Marcus awoke to the familiar protest of every joint my back, a testament to my foolishness. I am too old for this, my love, far too old to be sleeping on the cold ground in September chasing after shadows. And yet the audio recorder lay in his hand, a solid, undeniable truth, its memory holding 5 minutes of a song that should not exist. He made instant coffee on his small stove, a ritual against the chill, and ate another protein bar, trying to whisper his body into feeling 40 again, not 63. The morning was a sacred hush. The birds had returned their songs, stitching the silence back together. Whatever had cried out from the canyon's heart last night, now it slept. My dear friend Marcus approached the mouth of that canyon, as one would a cathedral, every part of his soul on high alert. The narrow passage opened into a secret world, perhaps 100 yards across, cradled by cliff walls that had kept secret since the dawn of time. Trees grew in a thick, protected embrace, nourished by a spring that was the canyon's lifeblood. A perfect sanctuary, a defensible home, the very kind of place an intelligent heart would choose. He did not enter. Not yet. Instead, he dedicated his morning to the art of gentle witness, photographing the entrance, the ancient stones, the silent trees, and the cliffs that watched over it all. He placed 2 trail cameras, like quiet offerings, his unblinking eyes to guard the threshold. If anything came or went, their story would be told. And then, my friend, he settled into the quiet art of waiting. You see, observation is 90% patience, a love affair with stillness. It's the careful watching, the noting of sacred patterns, the slow gathering of truths that finally reveal the soul of a thing. Marcus had spent months as a ghost in the mist with gorillas, weeks as a shadow in the canopy with orangutans, and days like a stone, while chimpanzees lived their lives just 20 feet away. He knew the language of waiting. He knew how to become part of the landscape, to be seen without being seen. The morning bled into the soft gold of afternoon. The canyon held its breath. Not a sound, not a stir, only the whisper of the wind in the pines and the gentle murmur of the spring. Had they sensed his heart and simply vanished like a dream upon waking? But then, around 2 in the afternoon, Marcus saw it. A flicker of movement, just a whisper at the canyon's far end near the spring. Something large, cloaked in shadow, moving with the deep care of a creature who knew its own magic, who knew how to remain a secret. He lifted his binoculars with the slow grace of a prayer, a gesture learned among mountain gorillas who would flee from anything that felt like a threat. And it was there, standing by the spring, half hidden by a giant cedar, but it was there. 7 feet tall, perhaps more. A magnificent being wrapped in dark brown hair that drank the filtered sunlight thick and wild for the mountain winters. Shoulders that could carry the weight of the world. Arms that hung with a grace that was not quite human, ending in hands that were kindred to his own, but broader, stronger. And the face. Oh, my friend, the face. Marcus could only see it in profile, but it was more than enough. The features were a beautiful, impossible bridge between human and gorilla. A strong brow, a noble jaw, but the shape of it was more like us, as if evolution had written a different poem, and this was its stunning final verse. And the expression, even from the side, was filled with a soul's intelligence. Those were not animal eyes. Those were the eyes of a being who thought, who felt, who understood. The creature was doing something by the spring. Marcus drew his focus tighter, his heart in his throat. It was gathering water, not with its hands, but in a vessel of some kind. He couldn't see it clearly, but the motion was a tender, unmistakable ballet. Scooping water, carrying it back toward a deeper darkness, where the cliff overhung, creating a gentle shelter. Carrying water to one who could not fetch their own, to the young one, the ailing one. A tightness seized Marcus's chest, so profound it stole his breath. This was the language of a mother's heart of caregiving. It was love, wasn't it, in its purest, most untamed form. The tenderness in those movements, the care not to spill a single drop, the urgency that lived beneath the caution that was a parent, desperate to save their child. He watched for another hour, a silent witness to this sacred ritual. The creature made 3 journeys from the spring. On the second, Marcus saw what it carried, not a crafted container, but a gift from the forest, a large leaf perhaps, or a piece of bark folded into a makeshift cup. A mind that could solve the puzzles of survival with grace. On the 3rd trip, the creature stopped. It became a statue carved from shadow and stillness, and it turned its head to look directly into the heart of Marcus's hiding place. He became stone. He held his breath until his lungs burned. The binoculars suddenly felt like a betrayal, a shout in the sacred silence, but he couldn't lower them, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but pray that the leaves and the distance were enough of a veil. The creature held his gaze for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 30 seconds. Those eyes, even across 100 yards, even through the glass, held an intelligence that made his skin hum and his heart ache with a beautiful sorrow. This was not an animal looking for a threat. This was a person, and yes, I believe that word applies, assessing the danger to their child. Then, with a deliberate, gentle grace, the creature raised one immense hand. It was not a threat. It was not aggression. It was an acknowledgement, a silent message sent across the space between them. I see you. I am letting you see me. For now. And with that quiet understanding, it turned and melted back into the shadows of the shelter. Marcus lowered the binoculars, his hands trembling. His breath was a wild thing in his chest, a storm of adrenaline and wonder so entwined he could no longer tell them apart. He had been seen, been known, been acknowledged, and been allowed to remain. And in that moment, my friend, everything changed. In all his years, in all his quiet conversations with the wild, no living being had ever looked back at him with understanding instead of fear or anger. This creature knew what a human was, knew Marcus was watching, and had made the conscious choice to offer not a warning, but grace. But why? The question became his heartbeat as the afternoon softened toward evening. Why allow him to witness this? Why not attack or vanish, or at least show its power? Every primate he had ever loved and studied would have done one of those three things. But this being had done something else entirely. It had acknowledged, assessed, and permitted. Perhaps it was a mother's desperation, her love for her child so fierce it outweighed her fear of him. Or maybe, just maybe, it sensed the heart of the man behind the lens and knew his curiosity was a form of love, not harm. Or perhaps the most staggering thought of all, perhaps it wanted him to see. It wanted a witness. It wanted its story to be known. That final thought sent a beautiful, terrifying shiver down his spine. The meaning of it was immense. If this creature understood the concept of a witness, of a story being told, it suggested a soul so complex, a culture so deep, a desire to finally step out of the shadows after centuries of being a ghost in the woods. He moved through the motions of setting up his camp for a second night, his hands working on their own, while his soul was spinning in a new cosmos. He ate dinner, but tasted nothing, and wrote in his journal with a hand that shook, trying to capture thoughts that were too vast and beautiful to be contained. As the world softened into night, their song returned to me, a duet of a parent and child, one voice deep, the other a delicate echo. And tonight, my love, they were so much closer, perhaps just 50 feet from where I sat at the canyon's edge. I could hear the poetry of their conversation then. The parent's voice, a low rumble of tender concern, each phrase lifting like a question mark in the cool air, and the little one's replies so fragile and faint, each sound a whisper of its pain. My hand, almost of its own accord, reached for my recorder to hold on to every precious second of their sacred exchange. This was the truth that mattered, a language of love and worry that no cold laboratory could ever dismiss as mere animal calls. For 10 beautiful minutes, their heartfelt exchange filled the silence. Then a shift in the air, the sound of a heavy heart, moving of branches parting for a purpose. I held my breath, becoming one with the stillness, as a magnificent shadow took form from the deeper darkness. It stood there, a guardian, etched against the stars, its gaze finding me, finding my small, defiant campfire. I had built that fire for my own weary bones, and in that moment its light connected us, reflecting in eyes that held the wisdom of the wild. Across 50 feet of hallowed darkness, we truly saw each other. Not just man and something else, but soul to soul, two worlds meeting in the quiet, impossible space where wonder is born. It spoke to me then, a sound so low and deliberate, a current of pure intention flowing directly to my heart. There was no threat, only a deep, resonant plea. And then it lifted its great hand in a gesture so impossibly familiar, an invitation. Come. The soul of it was asking me to come. Oh, every sensible part of me screamed a warning. You do not walk toward the wild's greatest mystery. You do not follow it into the dark. You do not surrender yourself to a power that could extinguish your life in a heartbeat. But a deeper truth whispered back. I had heard it in that voice, seen it in that gesture, and felt the desperation in its very stance. This was not a predator. This was a parent, my love, a parent pleading for its child. So I rose, leaving behind the useless tools of fear, and walked toward the canyon mouth, toward this magnificent being, toward whatever destiny was waiting for me. The careful, logical part of my mind had gone silent. What moved my feet was something far older, far more true, the simple human need to answer a cry for help with an open hand, to build a bridge of compassion where none was thought possible. It waited patient and still until I was just 10 feet away, close enough to breathe in its wild, earthy scent. Then, with a single knowing glance back to me, it turned and led the way into the heart of the canyon. And I followed, my love. With all my heart, I followed. Inside the canyon, the darkness was deeper, a velvet cloak hiding the stars. I switched on my light, a small, gentle beam, and it accepted this offering of sight without pause, continuing its steady walk toward a sanctuary carved from the cliffside. As we drew near, I heard it the sound of a small life struggling for each breath, a ragged sound that tore at my soul. And I understood then the depth of the love that had brought us here, a love so powerful, it shattered generations of fear. At the mouth of the cave, my guide paused and turned to me. Its gesture was one of pure grace, a quiet, careful question asking for permission. And then it stepped aside, granting me passage into its most sacred space. I took a breath, stepped across the threshold, and lifted my light to finally behold the reason for it all. My God, it was just a child so small, perhaps only 4 feet tall, wrapped in pale fur upon a carefully made bed of cedar. Its eyes were closed, its breath frantic and shallow. I saw the cruel angle of its arm, the wrongness of its struggling chest, and knew its pain was great. I knelt, and all the things my dear Linda ever taught me came rushing back, her gentle hands, her nurse's wisdom guiding mine. As I looked at the child, I felt the parent's gaze upon me, an intensity so profound, it was almost terrifying in its love and fear. "How long has it been?" I asked, my voice a whisper, hoping the feeling would matter more than the words. "When did this happen to your child?" And it answered not in words, but in a language of sorrowful sound and gesture, painting a picture of a terrible fall from the high canyon walls. It had been days ago, I feared, long enough for the hurt to deepen, for hope to begin to fade. I knew in my heart this was a wound too deep for me to heal here. This little one needed more than I could give medicines, a surgeon's skill, a gentle mending I did not possess in this wild place. I rose and met the parent's eyes, trying to pour all my meaning, all my sincerity into my own gaze. It watched me, its head tilted, and I saw it all. A brilliant mind, a desperate heart, and a flicker of hope that rested entirely on me. "My friend," I said, my voice soft and full of sorrow, "I cannot make this right here. The hurt is too great. Your child needs a healing I do not carry with me." And with my hands, I spoke of medicine, pointing back toward my world, trying to explain the impossible, that saving this precious life meant leaving this sacred mountain, meant trusting my kind in a way they had every reason not to. And I saw the war on its face, for it was a face expressive and full of soul. I saw ancient instinct warring with a parent's love. Its entire world screamed that my kind meant danger, yet its child was fading. And sometimes my love is the only instinct that matters. Its gaze fell upon its child, a look of infinite tenderness, and then returned to me. And in that moment a choice was made, one that surely broke every sacred law of its people. With a slow, deliberate grace, it bowed its head. It nodded. It understood. And in that moment, it was giving me its trust. My hands trembled as I took out my satellite phone, my own small link to that other world. I stepped back out under the stars, holding it up to the heavens like an offering, my heart whispering a single desperate prayer for a signal. At first, my friend there was nothing. And then, like a whispered prayer, a single bar of hope appeared. Then two. His fingers found the numbers 911, and in that eternal pause as the call connected, a lifetime seemed to pass until a voice thin and crackling like old paper finally broke through. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he began, his voice a steady anchor. "I am at coordinates 44.37 north by 121.89 west. I have a medical emergency. A young primate with severe trauma who needs evacuation immediately." And can you imagine the response? A voice from a world away asking, "Sir, did you say a primate? As in a monkey?" "Yes," he confirmed, painting a picture of the fragile life before him. A juvenile about 4 feet tall with broken limbs and what I fear are internal injuries. Its condition is critical. Then came the wall of procedure, the cold, distant words, "Sir, we don't have a protocol for wildlife rescue. You'll need to contact—" "This is not wildlife," he pleaded, his voice breaking, searching for words that could bridge the chasm between them. "This is a soul, a great ape species unknown to our world. And if it dies because I failed to find help, that weight will be on all of us. I am begging you, I need a helicopter, a veterinarian, and your discretion. Please." A silence stretched across the line, heavy and deep. Then finally a crack of light. "Hold your position. We're sending the Forest Service and emergency medical. Your estimated time is 90 minutes. And then a final chilling question. "Sir, is this a hoax?" And with all the sorrow in his heart, he whispered, "I wish to God it was." He ended the call and looked to the mouth of the cave where the parent stood, a silent, watchful shadow. 90 minutes. The little one had to endure for just 90 minutes, and then their secret world, the hiding, the solitude, the centuries of silence would be over. They would be seen, known, and either protected or preyed upon, saved or lost forever, depending entirely on the hearts of the humans who found them. Marcus moved back into the cave's embrace, kneeling beside the child again. Its breath was a fragile, failing rhythm, a terrible rattle that spoke of lungs filling with shadow of time slipping away. He felt so helpless, but he had to do something. He slipped off his jacket, draping it over the small body like a prayer for warmth. The arm was a clean break, a small mercy. But the ribs... Oh, the ribs were the true fear, the unspoken terror of a lung giving way, of a life bleeding out from within. The parent made a soft sound, a note of pure grief, almost a whimper. Marcus looked up and met its gaze, saw an ocean of sorrow glistening there. What could only be tears, if tears could cross the divide between our worlds. He reached out his hand, a slow, gentle question, offering what little comfort he had. And instead of recoiling, the great being leaned in, allowing his hand to come to rest on its massive arm. The fur was coarse and thick, alive with a deep, pulsing warmth. Beneath it, the muscle was like iron, a testament to a power that could have ended him in a heartbeat. But it chose not to. It chose to let him touch, to accept comfort in the only language that has ever truly mattered, the language of presence. "It's going to be okay," Marcus lied, because sometimes, my dear, a lie is the kindest truth we have to offer. "Help is coming. We will find a way through this." The parent made another sound, softer this time. And then, in a moment that shattered the world as he knew it, impossibly it spoke. It was not English, not a language of men. It was a single, perfect sound offered to Marcus with a meaning as clear and unmistakable as the moon in the sky. The sound was thank. It was so close, so achingly close to his own word, that it stole the breath from his lungs. Was it some incredible coincidence? Or had this hidden family been listening to us all along, learning that our strange sounds could carry the weight of our hearts, to learn a language, to understand a culture, to know that another being has a mind and a soul, and this wondrous creature had used what it had learned simply to thank him. The edges of the cave began to blur. Marcus told himself he wasn't crying. He was 63 years old, a man who had buried loved ones without shedding a tear. But something was stinging his eyes, and a profound weight was settling in his chest, making it hard to breathe. "You're welcome," he managed to say the words, a fragile whisper in the sacred quiet. "You're so very welcome." And so they waited together in that cave, a man and a being from a forgotten time, as the little one's breathing rattled on and the minutes crawled by like centuries. The parent never left its child's side, its massive hand a gentle constant comfort on the small form. And Marcus sat across from them, a witness engraving every moment of this impossible holy trust onto his very soul. After 40 minutes, that felt like a lifetime, he heard it, the rhythmic beat of the helicopter, the sound of the world arriving. The parent heard it too, its body tensing, a low warning rumbling deep in its chest, its eyes full of fear and questions locked onto Marcus, ready to defend its own, despite the silent promise between them. "It's okay," Marcus said quickly, his voice a calming whisper. "That is hope. That's how we save your baby." He stood and moved to the cave's entrance, waving his light in the urgent pulsing signal for help. The helicopter circled once, then twice, before finding a clearing 200 yards away and descending. Its arrival was a storm of wind and pine needles, its brilliant lights cutting through the darkness like a star falling to earth. Marcus turned back to the parent, his heart aching with the promise he had to make. "They will need to take the little one," he said softly, "and they will probably want you to go with them. I can't promise what will happen after this night, but I promise you with everything I am, I will make sure you are treated with kindness, both of you." The great creature looked at him for a long, searching moment. Then, making a decision born of a wisdom Marcus could never comprehend it, gently so carefully picked up its child, cradling the small broken body as if it were the most precious thing in the universe, and walked out of the cave, out of the darkness, and into the light, into a world that from that moment on could never be the same. My dear, when the Forest Service rangers came up the trail with all their medical gear, they saw the parent and just stopped cold. One of them actually dropped his pack. The EMTs behind them halted as if they'd hit an invisible wall. 4 souls with their flashlights and radios and all the misplaced certainty of our age stood before something that proved we know nothing at all. And Marcus, my love, he stepped right between them. "Stay calm," he said, his voice a gentle anchor. "It's not aggressive. It came to me for help." "What in heaven's name is that?" one of the rangers whispered, his voice trembling. "A great ape species we've never known," Marcus explained. "A parent and its child. The little one has suffered a severe trauma and needs us right now." "That's just not possible," the ranger breathed, shaking his head. "It can't be. It can't be real." "But it is real. It's standing right here before you," Marcus pleaded. "And if we don't move quickly, my love, this little one is going to die." And that, my dear, was what broke the spell. The EMTs moved forward so slowly, their hands always visible, their voices soft and low. They'd helped so many others, scared children, people lost in shock. This was no different, really. Just another soul who couldn't understand our words, only our kindness. The parent watched them approach its body, trembling with a fear so deep you could feel it on the air, yet it didn't back away. A low questioning sound rumbled in its chest, full of worry. Marcus moved to its side, resting a hand on its arm once more. "They are here to help," he whispered, a promise from his soul to theirs. "I promise." One of the EMTs, a woman of maybe 40 years with the kindest eyes, knelt beside the child. She didn't react to the impossible sight before her. She just saw a life that needed saving, assessing the wounds with a calm professional grace. "A broken left radius and ulna," she reported softly. "Multiple fractured ribs. The breathing suggests a collapsed lung. We have to transport immediately." She then looked up at the parent, her gaze full of compassion. "We need to take your baby. To help. To make better. Do you understand?" Oh, my love, the conflict on that parent's face. Marcus said he felt it in his own chest. Every instinct must have been screaming not to let these strangers take its child. But love, a love so profound, was whispering to do whatever it took to save them. And so the parent lowered its child into the EMT's arms. It took a single step back and made a sound that transcended all species, the sound of a parent's anguish, of having to trust, of being utterly helpless. "We should sedate it," another ranger said, his voice harsh in the sacred quiet, speaking of the parent. "Before it changes its mind. A tranquilizer dart, bring it down." "No." Marcus's voice cut through the night. "Absolutely not. This individual made a conscious choice to trust us. If we betray that trust, we become the monsters." "But we don't know what it could do," the ranger stammered. "In the last 2 hours," Marcus said, his voice unwavering, "it could have killed me 20 times over. It didn't. It asked for our help. We are going to honor that." The ranger looked to his supervisor, and the supervisor looked to Marcus, whose own eyes were fixed on the parent, still standing there, shaking with fear, but present, a guardian for its child against the whole world. "Fine," the supervisor finally sighed. "No sedation unless it becomes aggressive. But we're documenting everything. This will mean official reports, probably federal involvement, fish and wildlife. Maybe the CDC, definitely." "Later," Marcus interrupted gently. "Right now, we save the little one. Everything else can wait." They hiked out together, my love, the strangest, most beautiful procession these mountains had ever seen. 2 EMTs carrying the child on a stretcher. 4 rangers with weapons they'd been told not to use. Marcus walking beside the parent, holding onto that fragile thread of trust. And the parent itself moving through our world like someone in a waking nightmare. The helicopter couldn't possibly take them all. When the pilot saw the parent, his face went completely white. "That is not getting in my bird." "Yes, it is," Marcus said, his voice calm but absolute. "Or the little one goes into shock from being separated from its parent. The choice is yours. Take them both or watch one die." "Jesus Christ," the pilot muttered. "Fine. But if that thing freaks out up there..." "It won't." Marcus promised a prayer and a vow all in one. He told me later he didn't know if that was true, but he said it with so much faith that the pilot simply had to believe him. They loaded the child first, hooking up oxygen, starting an IV despite the impossible task of finding a vein beneath the fur. The parent watched every single movement, its eyes as sharp as a hawk's, ready to intervene, but holding back with an almost unimaginable strength. Then Marcus and the parent climbed inside. The helicopter was rated for 6 people. With the parent's weight, it was a dangerous gamble. You could see the fear on the pilot's face, but he powered up anyway, lifting them into the night as the rotors screamed in protest. The parent gripped the helicopter's frame so hard the metal groaned. Its eyes were wide with a terror I can hardly bear to imagine. This creature had likely never been off the ground in its life. The very idea of flight was an alien, impossible nightmare made real. Marcus's hand remained a gentle anchor on the parent's arm, his voice a low and steady current. It wasn't the words that mattered, my dear friend, but the simple act of speaking them. A human voice, promising presence, promising you are not alone. The same promise our voices have made since the dawn of time. "We are almost there," he whispered. "You are doing so wonderfully. Your baby is going to be all right. We are getting help." The journey to the regional hospital was a mere 12 minutes, but each moment was an eternity. For 12 long minutes, the parent trembled with a deep terror, but stayed beautifully present, their entire being focused on their child, choosing to trust this stranger over instinct with every beat of their heart. They landed softly on the hospital roof where a team was waiting. You could see they'd been told to expect something extraordinary, but it was clear they hadn't truly believed it until this moment. I saw it in their faces. Marcus told me the way the color drained, the way someone breathed, "Oh my God," with the kind of reverence you save for a miracle. But then their training, their deep-seated need to heal took over. They moved the little one inside. A call was placed to the veterinary specialist from our local zoo, and they prepared a sanctuary, a quarantine room that could hold both the parent and their precious child. The parent, you see, would not leave the little one's side. It watched every single procedure with eyes that held a universe of understanding. It knew these humans were trying to help, knew its child was in pain, but that this pain was a path to healing. When they had to intubate to help the small one breathe, a sound of pure distress escaped its lips, but it did not interfere. When they set the tiny broken arm in a cast, it leaned forward, watching, learning our ways of mending. As the sun began to warm the sky, the little one was stable. It was pneumonia, they confirmed, now being fought with antibiotics. The broken bones were set. Its breathing, though assisted, was steady. The vet said, her voice soft with hope, that it had about a 60% chance of pulling through. 60%. My friend, that was a world away from the chances it had in that cold, dark cave. The parent finally allowed itself to rest, its body sagging against the wall with the weight of exhaustion and a relief so profound it was almost tangible. And it made that sound again, a single clear word, thank, a gift offered to the medical team, to Marcus, to every soul who had shown them kindness. And the head surgeon, a woman who must have seen everything in her 30 years of emergency medicine, looked at Marcus and said something that he would carry in his heart forever. We just made first contact, didn't we? The real kind. Not with aliens from the stars, but with a soul that has been here with us all along. Yeah. Marcus breathed the truth of it settling deep in his bones. I think we did. The next 72 hours were a storm of humanity. Federal agencies descended like a flood, Fish and Wildlife, the CDC, the Department of the Interior. Even people from the Smithsonian arrived, their eyes alight with the prospect of discovery. They created a perimeter around the hospital, quarantining the entire floor, a world unto itself, where experts from every field imaginable came to witness the miracle. But Marcus refused to leave them. He planted himself in that room like an old sturdy tree and told anyone who tried to move him that they would have to drag his body out. And you know, the parent seemed calmer with him there, a steady presence against the constant tide of strangers who came to observe, to theorize, to document. Ashley appeared on the second day, having somehow in her own incredible way pushed through all the federal security. She stood in the doorway and looked at Marcus sitting beside a creature from our oldest stories, and her face was a beautiful, complicated map of awe and love and fear. "Dad," she whispered. "What did you do?" "What I had to, sweetheart." She walked into the room so slowly, so carefully, her every movement a promise of peace. The parent watched her with cautious eyes but did not flinch. After a moment, Ashley sat beside Marcus, her gaze falling on the small child sleeping under a web of medical care and on the parent keeping its eternal vigil. "Mom would have lost her ever-loving mind," she said, her voice a soft melody of memory. "She would have been right here helping," he said, his heart in his voice. "You know she would have." Yeah, she really would have. Ashley fell silent for a moment, lost in a shared memory. Then she asked, "What happens now?" "I don't know, my love. Everyone wants something different. The scientists want to study them. The government wants to control them. The world doesn't know about them yet, but when it does, it's going to be a tempest." "But what do you want?" Marcus looked at the parent, meeting those intelligent eyes that held as much curiosity as they did caution. "I want them to be okay. I want the baby to live, and I want them to have a choice, a real choice about what comes next." "A choice, Dad, they're—" Ashley stopped searching for the word. "What are they?" "They're people," he said with a certainty that settled the air. "Not human, but people. And that's what I'm going to tell everyone when this story breaks. That we didn't discover a new animal. We met another kind of person. That one word, person, hung between them heavy and beautiful with all its meaning. If they were people, they had rights, a voice, the ability to say no to being studied and prodded and put on display for our curiosity. Our laws had never considered a person who wasn't human. This, my friend, would force us to dream bigger. On the third day, the little one opened its eyes. They opened so slowly, veiled with medicine, confused by this strange, clean world. It made a questioning sound, so weak and so afraid. The parent was there in an instant, murmuring soft comforts, touching its child's face, with a tenderness that made Marcus's throat ache with the beauty of it. The juvenile's eyes found its parent and seemed to relax into that loving gaze. Then its gaze drifted and found Marcus, the strange two-legged creature who was not family, but who was a friend. And those eyes studied him with all the innocent curiosity, fear, and wonder a child's heart can hold. And so, my love, Marcus, became as still as the ancient stones, an offering of peace. He let the little one's eyes search his soul, letting its young heart decide if he was a danger or a kindred spirit. After a silence that held 1,000 lifetimes, a soft questioning sound drifted into the air. Then a tiny bandaged hand reached for him, a fragile bridge between two worlds. He met that small hand so gently, feeling the warmth of its life, the surprising silk of fur not yet touched by the world. It squeezed his finger, a language of trust known to every heart. And in that moment something inside of Marcus broke open, flooding his soul with a light he never knew existed. His voice was just a breath, a secret promise whispered between them. "Hey there, little one. You're safe now. Your parent knew just where to bring you." The child chirped again, a note of wonder in the sterile air, and the adult answered her voice, a melody woven with reassurance, a tapestry of love that needed no translation. "My dearest," they were speaking. A true conversation whispered into history, a sacred language the world had sworn was impossible unfolding right before his very eyes. But then the spell was broken. The door slid open, and in walked Dr. Sarah Martinez, a woman with a tablet for a heart and eyes that saw not a family, but a discovery. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice cutting through the quiet, "we must begin the tests. Genetic samples, cognitive assessments, behavioral studies. And Marcus, my love found a single word rising from the very depths of his being: no. You could almost hear the disbelief in her voice, as if he'd spoken a foreign tongue. "Excuse me. No." He repeated, his voice a shield around them. "You will not run your tests, not without their consent." "And can you believe it? My love," she laughed, a sound so hollow and sharp. "Consent," she scoffed. "From animals. They are not animals," he told her, his heart aching with the truth of it. They are people, and people, no matter their form, get to decide what happens to their own bodies. That's absurd. She countered her mind only on prizes and prestige. The scientific value alone is immeasurable. Their right to be is worth more than all your science, he declared. And if you force this, I will tell the entire world how the Smithsonian treated the first other-than-human persons like things to be dissected. Her face became a mask of stone. You cannot stop this. And with all the love and fury in his heart, he simply promised, watch me. She swept from the room, leaving a chill behind, no doubt to argue that a soul doesn't count if it wears a different skin. And Marcus knew, my love, that this was only the first battle in a long, heartbreaking war against the world's desire to own, to control, to consume. In all the noise and ambition, it seemed, no one thought to ask the mother and child what their own hearts desired. No one, my dearest, except for Marcus. On the 5th day, their secret was stolen. Grainy photographs like ghosts on a screen were leaked to the world, and in hours their sanctuary became a circus. The hospital's quiet shattered by a storm of reporters and believers, and angry signs calling it all a lie. The government tried to put the light back in the box, but a truth that desperate is impossible to contain. By the 6th day, the internet had given them names Eve and Abel, names heavy with our stories, our sins. Marcus hated them, for they were not their own, but he was one quiet voice against a hurricane. Then, on the 7th day, hope arrived. Elders from the indigenous tribes, their faces maps of wisdom, came to the hospital. They said their people had always known their stories, whispering of the forest people for centuries. They brought not cameras, but offerings of cedar and salmon. They came simply to offer respect. Marcus became a bridge of hands and heart, translating not just words, but intent. And Eve. Oh, you should have seen her. She seemed to breathe easier in their presence, a flower unfolding. Perhaps it was recognition, or perhaps it was just the beautiful, weightless gift of being honored instead of being wanted. The elders spoke in their beautiful, flowing language, their words a prayer, a declaration that Eve and Abel were people kindred spirits who deserved shelter under the arms of their nations if they so chose it. Eve listened to every syllable, her gaze deep and ancient, and then her own voice, hesitant but clear as a mountain spring, broke the silence. 2 words, my love, in a language all her own, carried a meaning that pierced every soul in the room. It was the simplest, most profound prayer. Want home. The elders nodded their faces, full of a deep, sad understanding. They turned to Marcus, though he already knew. She yearns for the mountains, they explained. For her people. This place. They gestured to the cold, sterile room. This cage of light and wires is not home. Marcus' heart felt so heavy, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The government won't let them go, he confided. They are too valuable, too important to them. One of the elders, a woman of perhaps 80 years with eyes that held the whole sky, looked at him with a gentle pity. Then, my friend, she said softly, it is your sacred duty to make them. You are the one who led them from the forest. Their journey home is now yours to finish. She was right, my friend. The truth of it settled upon Marcus's soul, a weight heavier than any stone. It was his hand that had reached out, his choice that had shattered their quiet world, pulling them into a light that would never again let them be unknown. And with that, their future became his to bear. The question that echoed in his heart was a simple, shattering one. How could he ever hope to mend what he had broken? On the 9th day, my love, the battle for their souls began. Marcus, his cause championed by a union of indigenous tribes and guardians of the earth, filed a suit that spoke a simple truth, that Eve and Abel were persons, not like us, perhaps, but persons all the same, beings woven from language and light, self-awareness and love, all the sacred threads that separate a soul from a shadow. But the world, my friend, often fears what it cannot easily define. The government fought back with cold logic, speaking of chaos and the rigid pursuit of science, as if a heart could ever be truly understood under a microscope. And then, like a whisper turning into a song, the videos changed everything. To see Eve's gentle care for Abel, to witness their quiet conversations, to watch little Abel's hand reach for Marcus. Oh, my dear, you couldn't look upon such tenderness and see anything but family. You saw people beautifully and wonderfully different, but people nonetheless. The heart of the world began to beat in time with theirs. Voices rose in a chorus outside silent buildings, a tide of humanity demanding they be seen. Even the scientists were torn between the desire to know and the wisdom to respect. The whole country, once so certain, was suddenly lost in the beautiful ancient question of what it truly means to have a soul. The hearing was set for 6 weeks after their worlds first collided. Little Abel was whole again by then, his body mended, his spirit bright and boundless as any child's, and Eve, his steadfast guardian, remained a portrait of grace, a deep river of calm that only raged when her son was threatened. A model patient, if you could forget the wild strength that slept just beneath her skin. For 3 hours, Marcus poured out his heart as testimony. He laid before them the science, yes, the elegant grammar of their voices, the cleverness of their hands, but more than that, he shared the sacred moment of connection when Eve's gratitude bridged the silent space between their two worlds. These are not animals. He finished, his voice a quiet fire. They are a people. A different people, yes, but a people all the same. And every person has the right to be whole, the right to be private, the right to simply go home. A voice of doubt rose to meet him. Dr. Thompson, the government's lawyer, began. Your life's work has been with primates. Are you now telling us that all of them deserve this same title of personhood? And Marcus, my love, answered with a deeper wisdom. I am saying that a soul is not a switch but a light with varying brightness. The light within Eve and Abel shines with a brilliance we have never witnessed before, and for that they deserve to be truly seen. So where does it end? The lawyer pressed, trying to draw a line in the sand. Dogs understand us. Parrots mimic our words. Elephants weep for their lost. Are they all persons? With the simple honesty that can only come from the heart? Marcus replied, I don't know where that line is drawn, but I know with every fiber of my being that Eve stands on the side of personhood. The judge, a woman in her 60s whose eyes held the weariness of 1,000 difficult choices, adjourned the court to consider the weight of their arguments. 2 days passed, each an eternity of held breath, and then she delivered her ruling. Eve and Abel were persons in the eyes of the law, not human, the ruling carefully etched, but persons. They were granted the sacred rights to their own bodies, their own minds, their own lives. No one could hold them captive, no one could study them without their willing consent. It was a decision that would echo through history for decades to come. But in the quiet truth of that moment, it meant only one thing. The most important thing of all, Eve and Abel were free to go home. 3 weeks later, after the endless rustle of paper was silenced, the journey home began. It was a pilgrimage, really. Marcus insisted on being there alongside the tribal elders whose wisdom had been a guiding star. No prying eyes, no flashing cameras. Just the quiet company of those who had always seen them as kindred spirits, not specimens. They traveled to where the roads dissolved back into the earth, and from there, they walked. Eve held Abel close, though his own legs were strong. Perhaps it was a mother's instinct, or maybe just the heart's need to hold on tight after so much fear. The warmth of September had given way to the crisp breath of October. The first snow had kissed the mountain tops a soft, white blessing. And the air, my friend, it smelled of winter's approach, a scent of endings and beginnings of change, whispered on the wind. When they reached the canyon where their story first began, Eve paused, setting Abel gently upon the earth. She turned her gaze, falling upon Marcus and the small band of souls who had walked this final path with them. For a timeless moment, she just looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw a universe of intelligence, an ocean of feeling, and a profound understanding of all that had passed between them. Then she did something that spoke a language beyond words. She reached out her powerful hand and gently placed it upon his chest, right over his heart. The sound she made was gratitude, but deeper still. It was connection, an acknowledgement of the sacred trust forged in that dark cave when she had asked a stranger for help, and he had answered. Marcus covered her hand with his own. "You're so welcome," he whispered. "Take care of your precious Abel. Stay safe, my friend." She answered with a sound that might have meant farewell, or perhaps until we meet again. Then she turned, took Abel's small hand, and together they walked back into the embrace of the canyon, into the deep shadows of the ancient trees, into the wilderness that had kept their secret for an eternity. Marcus watched until the forest reclaimed them. The elders stood beside him, their silence a prayer bearing witness to this holy moment of return of two worlds that had touched for a brief, wondrous time before gently parting ways. "Will we ever see them again?" Ashley's voice was a soft whisper. She had insisted on coming her aching knees, carrying her over 3 long miles because her heart needed to see this story to its gentle end. "I don't know, my dear," he answered softly. "Perhaps we will, but only if it is their wish to be seen." "What did we just do, Dad?" she asked, her eyes full of wonder. What did all of this mean? And Marcus let the question settle in his soul. He thought of Linda and her paintings of finding purpose when all felt lost, and of the breathtaking way life can whisper a new secret in your ear, just when you believe you have heard all of its songs. "I believe," he began, his voice soft, "that we've shown the world that there is still a place for wonder, my friend. A place for mystery. For all the things that we can't quite hold in our hands. And perhaps we proved that sometimes the only thing to do is to offer your help, even when it's frightening, even when it changes the course of your life, and even when you have no idea how the story will end." "That's a beautiful thought, Dr. Thompson," one of the elders remarked with a gentle smile. "A very kind sentiment." A genuine laugh escaped Marcus in spite of everything. "You're not wrong." They made their way back as the afternoon light bled into the soft hues of evening. Marcus felt a profound exhaustion in his bones, his knees aching and his back whispering of a protest to come. But his mind, my dear, his mind felt clearer than it had in years. The heavy cloak he'd worn since Linda's passing, that sense of being adrift, the endless question of what a man does when his life's work is done, all of it had finally begun to lift. Perhaps the work is never truly finished. Perhaps there is always more to find, more to understand, more bridges to build between souls. Maybe, just maybe, that is the entire point of it all. 6 months passed, and Marcus shared his story. Not in some sterile scientific journal. They would have demanded too much proof, too much observation, too much of an intrusion into the lives of Eve and Abel. No, instead, he wrote a book. He called it First Contact, a personal story of meeting another people. and it touched hearts everywhere, becoming a bestseller. Not because people needed scientific validation, many still called it a fabrication, despite the video and the court's decision. It succeeded because people longed to believe. They yearned to know that mysteries still lingered in this world, that wonders were still hiding in the wild places, that there was still room for things that science had yet to name and tame. Marcus gave every penny of the proceeds to the tribal coalition, the one working to protect that sacred mountain territory where Eve and Abel had vanished. It was to be a sanctuary. No logging, no new roads, no trespassing. A place where beings who wished to remain unseen could find their peace. He never laid eyes on Eve or Abel again. But sometimes, my friend, when he walked the familiar trails behind his home, he would find little signs. A small cairn of stones arranged in a pattern that spoke a silent language. Cedar boughs laid just so, reminding him of the bed where he'd found Abel in that cave. And once, a carving in the bark of a tree that felt so much like a thank you, though he told himself it was probably just the way the tree had grown. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Eve just checking in, making sure he was all right, just as he had once done for her son Abel, a tender connection stretching across the quiet space between their two worlds. After it all, Ashley started visiting more. She'd bring her children, Marcus's own grandchildren, to wander the mountain paths with him, their eyes searching for signs of the forest people. He never told them the exact location of the canyon. That secret was a promise he would keep to protect their sanctuary from the world. But he taught them how to look, how to listen, and how to hold the wild places in their hearts with respect. On the day that would have been Linda's 70th birthday, Marcus walked out to a clearing they had discovered together so many years ago. It was a place she had loved, where she would set up her easel to paint, where the light fell like a blessing through the trees, and the mountain seemed to open its arms. He sat on an old fallen log, watched the sun dip below the horizon, and spoke to her as if she were sitting right there beside him. "You were right, my love," he whispered into the growing twilight, "about finding a purpose, about helping where you can, about knowing there's so much more to this life than what we can see." He took a breath. "I miss you. I miss you every single day, but I think I'm going to be okay now. I still have work to do, stories to tell, and mysteries to keep safe for you." A soft wind sighed through the pines, carrying the lullaby of the forest settling in for the night. And maybe, just maybe, woven into the familiar sounds of crickets and rustling leaves, he heard something else. A sound he knew. A low, resonant call holding a meaning he would never fully grasp, but that his heart recognized all the same. "We thank you. Be well. We are here." A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. He rose his old knees, groaning a gentle complaint, and began the walk back to his home, to his life, and to the quiet promise of whatever was to come next. The forest held the memory, and so would he. Some moments change the very fabric of who you are. Those moments of true connection, of reaching across a divide that seems impossible, of choosing to trust, instead of fear, of offering a hand when it's needed most. Those are the moments that truly define what it means to be alive, what it means to be a person, human or otherwise. Marcus Thompson, at 63 years of age, had found his purpose once more in the last place on earth he ever thought to look. In a quiet cave deep in the mountains, holding the small hand of a child from another world, and looking into eyes that understood his heart completely. The world was so much larger than he had ever known, so much more wondrous, so much stranger, and so full of possibilities that reason could never quite capture, and science could never fully explain. And in the quiet of his heart, that was enough. My friend, that was everything. The first stars were beginning to prick the velvet sky as Marcus reached his house. He turned back for a final look at the tree line, at the deep, ancient darkness gathering there. He raised a hand not in a wave, but in a quiet acknowledgement, a gesture of gratitude, a goodbye that felt more like a promise. Then he went inside, made a pot of coffee, sat down at his desk, and began to write the next chapter. Because you see, some stories never truly end. They simply pause, waiting for that next breathtaking moment when two worlds touch and something impossible becomes real once more. And deep in the mountains, under a blanket of stars that had witnessed this dance for ages, Eve held her child close. She told him stories in a language of their own, stories of the human who had come to them in their time of need. The one who had seen them not as myths or animals, but as people. The forest kept its secrets safe, and in return the secrets kept the forest sacred. That was the unspoken promise. That was the delicate balance. That was how wonder could survive in a world so desperate to explain and control and possess every last thing. Some things you see are meant to remain a mystery. Some souls, human and otherwise, are meant to walk their own paths, paths that might cross and touch for a fleeting, beautiful moment before turning back toward their own worlds. Marcus understood that now. He accepted it, and he was so deeply grateful for it. The moon rose over the Cascades, a silent silver witness to the small dramas of love and loss unfolding below. The mountains stood ancient and patient. The trees lived and died and lived again, and somewhere in that vast breathing wilderness, two species separated by millions of years had found a way to bridge the impossible distance between them, just for a little while. And it was just enough. It was all my heart ever truly needed, and it would be my everything for all of time.